In one of the earliest lists on this channel, we counted down 10 MMA hype trains that got emphatically derailed, but the beauty or perhaps the tragedy of this sport is that we aren't short of would-be superstars falling on their faces. Since the last video we've had some new ones, but despite mixed martial arts being relatively young, don't think for 1 second that we struggled to find 10 the first time round, yet we had a lot to spare. But listen, we're not saying that all of these fighters are done, some certainly are, but for others their hype trains could be revived. I'm Tom from MMA On Point, and these are 10 more hype trains that got derailed. Number 10, Alexander Hernandez.
You didn't know me then, but I promise you know me now.
Those were the words from a debuting Alexander Hernandez after he sparked number 12 ranked lightweight Beneil Dariush on short notice. Speaking at his post-fight scrum, he laid out his manifesto to own the organisation, and while bordering on cocky, his mindset and gift of gab stood out. He waxed poetic about what he'd soon achieve, and in a sport woven in chaos, those that can prognosticate and ultimately be right often stand out. I mean, there's a reason Mystic Mac worked. In his second bout, he beat Olivier Aubin-Mercier by decision and subsequently said all the right things, insisting he came to devastate, not participate, and thus was disappointed with his performance. Regardless, it set up a fight with Donald Cerrone, a man many a fighter had made their name on, just ask Darren Till. And it was made even bigger because it was the first show on ESPN Plus and was headlined by a super fight between TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo. Moreover, Hernandez promoted his ass off, going after Cerrone's character, ability and age with ruthless bars like a rapper on a diss track.
On your 40th fight, if it took you that long to figure out what your goals are and that you're meant to be a champion, you're about 39 too fucking late.
But it backfired as Cerrone silenced him with hellacious ground and pound after knocking him down with a head kick. And while Hernandez bounced back, although he has since lost again, it's hard to come back from losing that devastatingly after being so ferocious leading in.
Dude, like, listen here, you little fucker, you know, like, that's how I felt.
Number 9, George Sotiropoulos. Despite a semi-final upset against Tom Spear, George Sotiropoulos was unquestionably the most successful cast member to emerge from The Ultimate Fighter's 6th season. Representing Australia, he quickly became the country's leading candidate to bring UFC gold home. But to do that, he had to leave the nest. So after TUF ended, he relocated to New York to train under Matt Serra, his coach on the show, and he'd also later have spells at Extreme Couture and 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. He began with 2 wins at 170 pounds before moving to lightweight, and there he won 5, bringing his UFC streak to 7. And while hardcore fans kept a keen eye on him, it was that 7th win, a Kimura over fellow jiu-jitsu whiz Joe Lozon, that got everyone's attention, Dana White included. So at UFC 127, in front of his fans in Australia, the Aussie was primed for a breakout against Dennis Siver, while White confirming a title shot if he had won. But he lost a decision after getting dropped twice in the first round. And if that didn't kill his hype, then knockouts against Rafael Dos Anjos and Ross Pearson did, especially after Pearson claimed that his boxing coach knocked George out in an off-camera exchange on TUF Smashes after George cheap-shotted him. Sotiropoulos was later cut after a 3rd straight loss to KJ Noons. Number 8, Will Brooks. With a 17-1 record, the future looked bright for Will Brooks. He was a Bellator champion and had just beaten Michael Chandler twice, the promotion's other best active lightweight. But he just wasn't happy with his employer, specifically their focus on newly signed talent at the expense of their more tenured fighters. So in early 2016, he revealed he'd finished his contract and test free agency, but it didn't have to wait or even fight because in May he was released and in June he was a UFC fighter. And for many fans, an intriguing story was emerging. Eddie Alvarez, who was Brooks' championship predecessor in Bellator and who had only managed to go 1-1 with Chandler, was scheduled to compete for the UFC's 155-pound title. Moreover, it was set for the eve of Will's debut against Ross Pearson. And while a lot had to happen before their showdown could be discussed, they successfully jumped the first hurdle. Alvarez spectacularly captured the belt and Brooks beat Pearson in a fine but relatively underwhelming performance. Still, he called out the new champ, promising he wouldn't get away this time. But then everything just went wrong when he faced Alex Oliveira. Cowboy weighed in a whopping 5.5 pounds overweight, yet Brooks, to his credit, still took the fight, only to suffer a broken rib early and ultimately lose by TKO. Alvarez lost the following month to McGregor, nipping that fantasy matchup in the bud, which led to Brooks losing twice more before being dropped entirely by the UFC. Number 7, Travis Browne. Newer fans primarily know Travis Browne as Ronda Rousey's main squeeze, but when he debuted in the UFC, he was a bona fide prospect. He was big yet athletic, he was 9-0 with 8 finishes, and a month shy of his 28th birthday, he was young for a heavyweight. So after 2 years in the UFC, he was still undefeated, having finished 3 of his 5 opponents. So following a submission of the night win against Chad Griggs, he got his first headlining spot against Antonio Silva, and it was that classic matchup, the up-and-comer who needed a valuable scout to reach the next level against the declining veteran who could provide the opportunity. But it went tits up for Browne as he tore his hamstring early and then was finished in the first round. And while his momentum had halted for now, he was given a pass by most because of the injury.
That motherfucker doesn't beat me on my worst day. You know, I got injured in the fight.
And after 3 spectacular knockouts against Gabriel Gonzaga, Alistair Overeem and Josh Barnett, the loss felt like an aberration. Browne then got his first main event slot since losing, this time against a re-debuting Fabricio Werdum, a man proficient at ending hot streaks. Just ask Fedor. And that's what he did against Browne, dismantling him everywhere despite pundits believing he needed to grapple. Happer would win just 2 of his next 7 despite a change in camp, but honestly, that probably made things worse. Number 6, Sokoudjou. Sokoudjou might not be a legend like Guy Mezger, Kazuchi Sakuraba, Alistair Overeem or Dan Henderson, still he achieved something they never could, defeating Antonio Rogerio Nogueira or Ricardo Arona, and he beat both. Coming off a knockout loss to the ageless wonder that is Glover Teixeira, seriously, that was 14 fucking years ago, Sokoudjou debuted in Pride against Nogueira in what should have been a despicable mismatch. But he knocked Little Nog out in just 23 seconds before stopping Arona in what was ultimately Pride's last ever event. And that's what makes him distinct from many of his peers on this list. He may have been mostly hype, say like the Phantom Menace, but there were 2 legitimate reasons for that. Knockouts over a couple of elite light heavyweights. But that was a double-edged sword. At his experience level, he should have been fighting appropriate challenges, i.e. prospects, but that would have been damn near impossible to justify based on the aforementioned wins. So when he signed with the UFC, that's essentially what they did with him. They decided to keep the train on the track, so to speak, matching him against Lyoto Machida. But Machida easily submitted him in the second, killing the Predator-like mystique he had built up in Pride, and while he rebounded against Kazuhiro Nakamura, a knockout to Louise Kane sealed his fate, and sadly, he was cut. Number 5, Johnny Walker. Just when fans thought Khalil Roundtree Jr.'s hype train was about to pick up some steam, Johnny Walker emerged. 4 months earlier, Roundtree looked incredible against legendary kickboxer Gokhan Saki, knocking him out in under 2 minutes. Yet Walker, who fought like a man who had a few shots of his namesake, made short work of Khalil, finishing him in the first. Next, he beat Justin Ledet in 15 seconds, ending it with just the most absurd hook kick to spinning back fist combination. A 36-second flying knee against Misha Serkinov then followed in a fight where he took more damage in celebration than in battle, requiring surgery after a worm gone wrong. But mishap or not, he was the man to beat the champ John Jones in the eyes of many fans. He even said a detour to heavyweight to beat up Francis Ngannou before dethroning Jones wasn't out of the question. But first he had some work to do at 205, and in November 2019 he got his first top 10 opponent in ranked number 7 Corey Anderson. And to much surprise, Anderson, who's normally a grinder, molly-whopped Walker, reducing the Brazilian's thrilling offense to a spectacular liability.
Fireworks, you know, the lit was wick when the bell went off and it exploded on his chin. Yeah, it was just a lot of hype coming into it on him.
And while that was the terminus for many, some fans stayed aboard, especially when he revealed he was joining Faraz Zahabi at TriStar. But despite the new coach, he lost handedly to Nikita Krylov, and those who weren't off the train before, they surely were now. Number 4, Ben Askren. So if you revisit the original video we published on this subject, you'll notice we were flooded by comments about how Ben Askren just missed the cut. But in truth, he was safe by almost a year and a half.
Well, you didn't think I forgot about you, did you?
Before his short-lived retirement and the unprecedented trade that brought him to the UFC, he was in a strange place. And no, not one championship, although the Glassdoor review certainly revealed that it is, well, it's a unique company. But by a strange place, I mean he was the consensus best 170 pounder not signed by the UFC, yet for Dana White that was something that he was unprepared to admit. But in late 2018, the trade was revealed, Askren was now a UFC guy and Demetrius Johnson was leaving for Singapore. And while some buzz was anticipated, especially from the hardcores, the funkiest of Askren fans couldn't have ever foreseen the reaction he got. He became an instant star and the hype train was rolling into his debut against Robbie Lawler. And after just surviving the most insane thing I've ever seen, he dug deep and won with a controversial bulldog choke. And while it just about kept fans on his side, nothing he said could save him after he ran into a knee from a floating street Christ. He then had one more fight in the UFC, a submission loss to Damian Maia, but his hype had already been collected by Gamebred. Number 3, Kat Zingano. The Kat Zingano hype train often gets forgotten because it zipped by while the Ronda Express took all the shine, but it was there. Just 2 weeks before Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche introduced women's MMA to the UFC, its second bout was revealed, Miesha Tate versus Ngannou, with a title shot and Ultimate Fighter coaching gig on the line. Having defended her Strikeforce title against Rousey on Showtime, Tate was comfortable in the pressure cooker, but there were some questions about the undefeated Zingano, whose biggest fight aired on Fight Pass in a small auditorium for Invicta. So when she got incredibly emotional walking to the octagon, the warning bells started ringing. But a few tears didn't stop her scoring a ruthless finish, painting Miesha's face crimson with her knees and elbows. But soon before TUF, she injured her knee needing surgery and she was replaced by Miesha, who ultimately lost to Rousey again. Kat then returned against fellow finisher Amanda Nunes, and it was just months after her husband's tragic suicide. And just like the Tate fight, she finished and left Nunes in a pool of her own blood. And it was that mean streak that excited fans since Rousey had never met anyone who could compare. But Zingano made a grave error. She rushed the champion, who easily sidestepped her flying knee, got a takedown, transitioned to an armbar and won in 14 short seconds. Zingano never competed for the title again, losing 3 of her next 4 fights. Number 2, Roger Huerta. Roger Huerta once said his life is the kind Hollywood producers make movies about, and that's not hyperbole. As a child, he lacked both a stable home and guardian, and was even homeless for a time. Yet he somehow came out the other side, discovered wrestling, and then eventually MMA. At 23, with 14 wins and just a single loss, he debuted in the UFC and made an immediate impact thanks to his thrilling style, finishing ability, and let's be honest, movie star good looks. He soon graced the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine, a first for a mixed martial artist, and months later he had 2007's Fight of the Year with Clay Guida, earning his 5th win in the calendar year, a record that's yet to be broken, only tied by Neil Magny, and he was then inserted into a title eliminator against Kenny Florian. However, with just 2 fights left on his deal, he allegedly argued for a contract worth more than the champ BJ Penn's, which the UFC refused. Then, to make matters worse, he lost to Florian by decision. For some, it was proof he wasn't worth their attention, but for others, it was merely a blip on the radar. And after a small part in the dreadful adaptation of Tekken and a break from the sport to further pursue acting and modelling, he lost to Gray Maynard, his stylistic kryptonite. He then left the UFC and never recaptured the attention he once had. And number 1, Felipe Nova. These days, Felipe Nova, the self-proclaimed toughest registered nurse on the planet, is in a different kind of battle on the front line fighting COVID-19. But in 2008, his run on The Ultimate Fighter was so impressive, it made Dana White kind of just give the results away. He claimed he found the next Anderson Silva in a 24-year-old lightweight, but just 2 cast members met that demographic, Nova and Joe Duarte. And while it didn't necessarily reveal the finalist, it'd be strange to compare a loser to a winner like Anderson. Regardless, most bloggers believed it was Duarte, especially after Nova fainted while Dana was about to do his "do you want to be a fucking fighter" stick. However, that prediction was short-lived because Nova beat Duarte to get into the house, revealing himself as the Spider 2.0. Nogueira would later confirm it was when compared Nova to Silva in an episode before White went even further by likening him to a young GSP2. All before he actually made his UFC debut. Jesus. He made it to the finals as expected, but his opponent Efrain Escudero was just too much, outworking him to earn a decision. And after being compared to two bona fide GOATs, the loss was just devastating, and he never really recovered, losing twice before being cut. Thanks so much to Robert Palin for writing this list. You can go follow him at the Robert Palin. And thanks so much to MJ Moore for editing it. You can go follow him at Tom MJ Moore. Thanks for watching that video. Please do like and subscribe. We upload 3 jaw-droppingly juicy MMA videos a week to get your teeth into, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to follow us at OnPoint MMA and Tom A. Ransom on Twitter, and you make sure you have a great day.